Hello and welcome to the Harryman Show, episode 49. Today is a true honor to have an excellent craftsman on the show. We have David Lage from Case DrumCo. He does some amazing stuff and he's got a lot of good things in the works. We're going to hear a little bit more about it today. How you doing, David?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. You're calling all the way from Washington, D.C., right?
That's right, our nation's capital.
Nice. So you busy working on drums today, or you just have quite a few projects stacked right now?
Super busy on working on drums today. As many drum makers in the industry have had a little bit of a snafu with FedEx, which has slowed things down a little bit, but I'm just tying up loose ends. It's pretty busy over here.
Oh, nice. So I want to talk about, are you the founder and the owner of the company?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
And how long have you been going at it with this company?
I started CaseBass in 2017. Didn't really bring it out to the world. Was kind of like putting pieces in places, trying to get patents and all of that fun stuff before I kind of launched. I would say I officially launched in 2018.
Oh, nice. So that's pretty recent there.
Yeah. It's a new company. It's still really small.
Nice.
But that's kind of the way I like it. I like to put hands on every single piece that goes out, you know?
Nice. And is it just you doing the whole thing, the whole operation there?
Yeah. So as far as the manufacturing goes, that is something that solely I do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I won't let anybody else touch my drum.
That's right. That's pretty honorable, and it shows in your work too.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
So
it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. So what was the main inspiration? Were you just into the idea of drum building, or were you experimenting with actual suitcase drums?
So, I mean, I'm a drummer. I've been a drummer since I, was a kid. And so I've always been drawn to custom drums, like growing up with Travis Barker and seeing, plaid, Orange County kits and stuff like that. I was always super drawn to the unique drum kit.
Mm-hmm.
I never really made drums. I mean, I played around with it. Woodworking is sort of a passion of mine, but it wasn't until I bought a car that was way too small for a drummer to buy, and I didn't realize how catastrophic that was until I tried to fit a drum kit in there. And so, like a lot of drummers, I found myself kind of looking for a solution that was portable, but that also had some tone qualities and where I didn't have to lose a lot. And I saw suitcase drums as sort of an old school way to, pack up a drum kit and have a super small footprint. But there were flaws, I felt like flaws in the designs that I was seeing. And I didn't really see anybody who was making like a tour-proof, super high-end version of that. And that's kind of what I wanted. I was willing to spend a little bit more. And so at the end of the day, I just ended up making one and put it on Instagram. And then a lot of my drummer friends freaked out. And then I started making some for them. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. It just kind of spiraled out of control from there.
And that's actually how I found you too. Just going through Instagram, and I started seeing your stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. Just that, even the way you do your photos and the colors, it's truly a work of art there.
I appreciate that.
Now, you mentioned you had a small car. Were you bringing around a smaller kit at the time, or did you start kind of just playing out with the suitcase kit right away?
So as soon as I built my first case, I immediately ditched the full-size kit and started using that as what I played with. In Washington, D.C., there's not a lot of freestanding houses, so playing drums in your house isn't really an option.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time, I would carry a drum set in the back of my car, and I would literally stop at parks, street corners, and I would busk as a way to essentially practice without paying for a space.
Oh, nice.
Switched to a smaller car, that immediately was not possible. And so kind of the race was on to find some sort of solution where, again, I can have something portable, but I don't really lose a lot because it always seems like you were sacrificing something.
Yeah.
When you went to something portable, either it looked super weird and gimmicky or it just didn't sound the way it should sound. There just always seemed to be kind of a downside. And so I felt like looking at a suitcase drum almost from the perspective of a speaker, if you put a drum inside of a resonating chamber, would that make it sound fuller and bigger? And it just luckily worked. So kind of developed from there.
Now, speaking of that, I know it came with the practice, but what were your challenges dynamically? Was the suitcase projecting like a bass drum at first, or was that something that was kind of a uphill battle with that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like, at first it sounded like what you think it would, kind of like a dead, muddy sound.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I figured out air pressure that the tone started to become more pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, it took a lot of trial and error. But essentially, like a speaker box, if you manage the air pressure, you can increase the tone that you get. And so it actually turned out to be a really popular product for studios.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you can essentially put a mic inside the case, and it's like having your own isolation room just for your bass drum, where you can pretty much do and get whatever tone you want, just based on control. So
nice. And that's definitely a whole experimental field there too. Before we dive into the specs of it, I kind of want to talk about, you said you were a drummer prior to this. How long were you playing, and what were your main influences?
Oh man. So I've been playing since I was 13. So, I'm 32 now. So if you kind of place that timeline, pretty standard influences, Travis Barker. I actually was when I was a kid, a huge Lars Ulrich fan. I know that's very uncool now, but
that's cool. He influenced me to play double bass.
Yeah, I was in a Metallica cover band. That was the first band I was ever in.
Oh,
we
nice.
played the 8th grade talent show. So I got my first girlfriend too. But
there you go.
But yeah, and then I got into more rhythm based music. I was heavily into reggae, dub, things like that, dance hall music. And then I got into hip hop, and I've just kind of been really an open book when it comes to drumming. I don't have one particular genre that I lean towards. I basically just, play what feels natural at the time,
Yeah, and you mentioned Travis Barker, and he was kind of, I don't know if he's the first person to do this, but play like a 22 in depth, bass drum, and experimenting with different bass drum sizes there too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was, in my opinion, one of the first pioneers, at least in the mainstream, of just saying like, how crazy can we make the actual instrument itself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously, like, I'm actually making one for him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Travis is on the build list.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So that was a big milestone for me.
Yeah. And speaking of Travis, he did put Orange County on the map, in my opinion. I know there's some other bigger hands and play with that company with Adrian Young and stuff like that, but he did, commercialize the art of custom drums, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, Orange County before and after Travis Barker was vastly different, and honestly, I think it opened up, to other companies that were pushing the envelope too.
Yeah, he kind of had wacky finishes and weird hoops, and I mean, I definitely like to pay credit what it's due, but I like how it tied into the influence of getting you going, and now it's going full circle with you.
I know, right? I actually I have a signed Travis Barker drum head that I have like on a shelf, and I've had it on a shelf forever.
Huh.
And it was funny. I was working on his case and kind of looked up at the signed drum head. Like, this is just weird.
Yeah, I bet. Are you able to tell us what kind of style he's having you build?
Yeah, I can. So he's really into like the black leather look. Mm-hmm. So it's a black leather case with sort of like a caramel leather accents. So caramel leather handle, caramel leather corners, and then straps. And then we're doing bright brass hardware all around. Nice. And I'm doing an exotic hoop and just a totally crazy custom interior.
Oh yeah, that sounds classy, to be honest with you. And I know it kind of sounds like a Cadillac style.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually manufacturing. Well, I'm upcycling a classic Cadillac emblem to be the badge for this.
Oh yeah,
and so
I saw that coming. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if Travis Barker went to any drum company and was like, "Build me a drum set," like that's probably where most people's minds would go.
Yeah.
But he's really into classic Cadillacs.
But to get it back to you, so obviously you said you were playing street corners and influence. What was that kind of becoming like a hip thing in Washington D.C. on that side, like kind of like the street corner hip hop drumming?
Yes, that is huge in Washington D.C. You can go to like Chinatown in D.C. on any day. Well, I guess pre-pandemic, and see a whole multitude of amazing artists And that's really like the community that I started building this company. And I have a lot of great friends that have leveraged their street performance career into like actual careers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very much like the culture in Washington, D.C. There's a genre of music called go-go, which a lot of people do when they street perform. There's a lot of like mobile go-go bands, which is like a really weird mix of funk and hip-hop with a little bit like gospel feel behind it almost.
Oh, nice.
Some Latin influences. It's a very unique thing to Washington, D.C. But that's really like my bread and butter.
Yeah,
I grew up doing.
You brought up Precode. I think that kind of boomed into the whole Instagram drumming thing too. I've noticed a lot of drummers doing experimental stuff with kits like yours and stuff like that. So I saw the boom there, as well as doing loops and hip hop beats too.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people that are in confined spaces that are trying to play at home. And so there have been a couple innovations that we did specifically for that. So like obviously internally triggered drums with mesh heads has been a new build that we've been doing, which is pretty cool. It has an internal brain that's mounted inside the case and can be toggled through with a series of buttons on the side of the case, so you can have inputs and you can literally connect an entire electric drum set together. And this is sort of hub and the power source and everything. It's pretty cool.
That's next level, dude. That's pretty badass.
That's what we're trying to do, you know?
Yeah. So I was going to touch base on that, but I wanted to ask, obviously the suitcases aren't being used as they used to be, but how do you go searching for them? Do you make the suitcase for yourself, or do you kind of scan the internet or Goodwill stores looking for suitcases?
So there's two series that I offer. So the first series, and this is the original series that started with CaseBass, is called the Vintage series. And basically I got really good at finding suitcase collectors online and, just started forming relationships with them. So at any given time, I could have 3 or 4 people out scouring for suitcases, and the demand at the time, even at the beginning, was so high that I would be buying basically people's entire collections. Eventually, you started to see like a saturation. You buy 250 vintage cases, and all of a sudden, like the pickings are a lot slimmer.
Yeah.
So that's what started me saying, well, why don't I just make a suitcase? There are all these limitations with sizes and materials. I was always having to re-rivet old suitcases, build internal frames to make them stronger, everything, trying to basically make a square peg fit in a round hole. And I was like, I can just make this. I can just make the case.
Nice.
And so that's how we started the custom shop series. And that's literally handmade from the ground up. I mean, even the clasps that hold the handles on are hand machined out of solid brass. Like everything is handmade on that product.
Nice. And excuse my ignorance on this. What is the most used materials in a suitcase? Is it like a hard plastic or any kind of woods that kind of stand out?
So on a vintage suitcase, it's usually like a really crappy, thin ply of wood, oftentimes soaked in a super toxic glue to give it strength. It's god-awful to work with. So definitely when I started making my own suitcases, that was something that I wanted to get away from right away. And so starting with the basic materials, I used basically the finest voidless plywood you can buy.
Okay.
And I played around with solid woods and plies and found that with plies, just the weight factor was so much better because, this has to be a portable product.
Yeah, you got to be able to carry it around.
Yeah. And so having a Russian voidless ply definitely was the next level because it gives it strength and it's super light too.
Nice. And another kind of dummy question. Is there typical sizes that you kind of, structure around? Is there like a typical suitcase size or being custom, can you kind of branch out and do a huge suitcase style?
Yeah. I mean, different people have done different things. Like, I'm good friends with Buddy from Love Custom Drums, who is, if you ever want to interview someone who's been pivotal in the drum industry, he's a great guy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Me and him have played around with like, how do we fit a 24-inch shell in a suitcase and make that, and stuff like that. But generally speaking, like the cases are all usually the same size, which is 20 by 24 by 8. Fits an 18-inch shell in it perfectly.
Okay.
vintage series cases are usually smaller. They're usually like 17 by 17 by 5.
Mm-hmm.
So they fit a 16-inch drum. So, you know, a little less tone, a little less storage room than the custom shop.
Mm-hmm.
But you're really like with the vintage series, you kind of get what you get. You get what's available out there. So I've built with all sorts of odd shapes and sizes.
Nice. And I know you mentioned using mesh heads, but what is your go-to head choice on putting on the case?
So I am an Aquarian person all the way through.
Nice.
I really like their super kick drum heads.
Yep.
That's something that, I mean, even when I've had, like I made a drum for Thomas Pridgeon, who's also a really great hero of mine, and he's sponsored by Evans. Mm-hmm. And I had to make an Evans head for him, or I had to use an Evans head. And I literally ended up buying an Evans head, buying an Aquarian head, melting off the felt ring that was on the inside, and gluing it to the backside. Basically, I made it into a super kick.
Oh, nice.
So I'm very fond of that style, and you know, I'm branching out a little bit more of like the vintage style drum heads, but it always kind of lands in the Aquarian realm.
Yeah, Aquarian have a very, very thick ply, and I was seeing whenever I use them, their life tends to be about 3 or 4 times longer, especially with bass drum heads.
Yeah, and they use glue versus crimping and stuff like that, and so I honestly feel like that kind of dampens the head a little more. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I've just the guys at Aquarian have been awesome. I was originally planning to curate their most recent NAMM display. Mm-hmm. During I was running a charity event last Christmas, and Aquarian was awesome. They reached out to me. They were like, "How can we help?" Offered to send boxes of drum heads to give away as a raffle prize. And I was at a fork in the road. Do I finish out this charity, or do I go curate Aquarian's display at NAMM? And chose the charity. I feel good about that choice, but they've maintained a really solid relationship with me through this. And for me being so little, I appreciate that, you know?
Yeah, that's very cool. And one question I want to ask you is storage. So obviously this is a portable unit. How much can you typically store in the suitcase itself when you're carrying it around?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally it's a 14-inch snare drum, some hi-hats, and a small diameter crash, something like a 16 or a 17. Mm-hmm. I have built nesting kits where you can fit floor tom, a very small snare drum, cymbals, floor tom legs, drumsticks, and that's usually about the max. It gets kind of heavy at a certain point. You try to put your whole kit into one box, you know? That's
nice. Yeah, that's a lot, to be honest with you. That's quite cool. I know you pictured with a lot of different types of drums, but what are some of your favorite drums that you think accent the bass drum cases that you use?
So I'm a big fan of walnut shells, walnut and mahogany. It really depends on the person's playing style. So one thing that I, being a fan of custom drums when I started this company, you kind of think about like, what's your mission statement? Like, this is your company. You can control everything about it. So make it the way you want to make it. Mm-hmm. And one thing I really like about our process is if you go to make an order, let's say, well, we took our website down during COVID, but if it was up and you were to place an order, you would immediately get a phone call.
Nice.
And that phone call would lead to a conversation about tone, inspiration, style, what music you play. People are sending me links to their band. Where do you want to play this? What's the application? Are we doing studio? Are we touring? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I can kind of pick the right shell material, pick the right attachments and things like that based on that individual person. So it's not as cookie cutter as it should be.
No, and I hope you continue to do that process because it puts a lot more value and weight into the product as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's a space in our industry for people who want to be very thoughtful with the products that they make. And so those are always the companies I'm most drawn to. And I think that's sort of what I had in mind when I was trying to come up with that mission statement, how I wanted to go about doing this.
And as you grow, you will find like-minded people to work with too. And I have a feeling you're going to do really well in that situation where you're going to have to branch out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, you can continue that custom kind of personality. I think that's going to do wonders for you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's nice getting to connect with people. The people that are CaseBass fans are diehard. the clients that we have are like literally like family members. We all check in on each other and
Nice.
stay in touch and send each other photos. And, it's like a little bit of a culture within the company, which I've always wanted to have.
Nice. Now, if I were a customer going into it and seeing it, what would be the best place to reach out to you? Just going to the website or just kind of contacting you directly?
So right now we're actually not taking orders. We'll be taking orders at the beginning of next month. So one thing that happened during COVID is demand went way up.
Really?
Oh yeah. And we've always had a bit of a waiting list, right? That comes with one person only being able to actually make the product. Its lead times are a little bit longer than someone, busting out an assembly line. But at a certain point, the waiting list was getting a little excessive, and so we took everything down to kind of catch up, and we're finally on the end of that catch-up phase.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wanted to reach out when we're open, our website is the number one place to do that, which is CaseBass.com.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people reach out on Instagram. They'll just message us and say, hey, I love your work. I want to buy one. Tell me about it. And that usually leads to, obviously, a longer conversation.
Nice. Yeah. So, going forward, that's the silver lining in the clouds there. And with all the downtime everyone has, it kind of does bring, hobby music kind of uphill too as well. So it's kind of cool to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially locally, being in Washington, D.C., the proximity to government, I think a lot of people are home but still working. Mm-hmm. So they have dispensable income, but also free time.
Yeah.
Maybe even boredom. So the ability to have sort of a small footprint drum, I think, has been important to a lot of people in quarantine.
Now, I wanted to touch base on the electronic kit that you were talking about. I've noticed, as you were mentioning earlier, you have XLR inputs directly into it, which I think is really cool. Are you using, what type of triggers are you using on the head, and what kind of modules are you using to kind of get that going?
So the triggers that I use are made by a company called Hellinson's.
Mm-hmm.
They make an internally mounted dual zone trigger, and they're all handmade.
Oh, nice.
Working with small companies is kind of what I prefer to do. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to modules and things like that, obviously you have to go with usually roll-in modules. Mm-hmm. A lot of times if a customer's playing with electric kits, I'll have them send me their module and I'll retrofit it to fit inside the case.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it can be, that way you can take it in and out. If you want to just play your regular electric kit, you can.
Nice. And and it's just a simple XLR input too, right? Nothing too crazy after that.
Absolutely. So we do a 1/4-inch TRS or XLR, depending on what you want. We also do internal mics as well. So that's typically XLR.
Oh, nice. Now I want to talk about your artist roster. Obviously it's been growing over the years. Is there any kits that you made that kind of stand out over some well-known endorsees?
Yeah, so the Travis Barker one's pretty big, although I wouldn't call him an endorsee at all. This is
I apologize for that.
It's okay. It's more of a passion project that, mm-hmm. He reached out and wanted one, so I'm happy to make him one. Mm-hmm. I would say the one I'm working on that I'm really excited about right now is for Questlove, which is going to be pretty cool.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, man.
So it's a African-inspired case. It's 3-tone instead of 2-tone. So it's red, black, and green.
Oh, nice.
We're doing some pretty cool brass work with it as well. Basically turning a port into a badge. So it'll make more sense when we show pictures. But that's the most exciting one I think we're working on right now. It's just totally unique. We're getting a bunch of aluminum drums designed to match it. Mm-hmm. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I correct me if I'm wrong. It'd be really cool to see him play it on the Jimmy Fallon show, too. I know he's a big Lubbock guy, but that'd be amazing.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
So
his brother-in-law is the one who reached out, and this is actually a Christmas present for Quest.
Oh, does he know about it? Or I'm sorry.
He has no idea, but I'm sure he won't be upset if he finds out.
Oh, okay. I apologize for bringing that up. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
All right.
All good.
All right. So if I wanted to hear him, I know your Instagram page is pretty well built, but what would be the best sound samples to kind of go and hear him?
We post a lot of videos on Facebook, on Instagram. We have a few videos up on YouTube if you search CaseBass. some of the longer videos you would find on YouTube. For example, there's a studio owner who went and like basically dissected the tone of the product based on different input methods and how you mic it. And as a studio owner, he kind of took CaseBass and picked it apart a bit, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's on our YouTube page. And then we have videos from our charity that we did last year. We have videos of drummers like Carl Groman, who's on the CaseBass roster. He's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Very unique player. We have maybe 5 or 10 videos of that in different situations, so you get a nice balance of what the sound looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, yeah, just the basic socials, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. That's the best place to find stuff.
Nice, yeah, and I'll definitely share the links there because I geek out on that stuff too, and I can get stuck in a rabbit hole for hours just watching that stuff.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah. So, David, I know you're a busy guy, and I don't want to keep you too long. So as you mentioned, the best place to reach out to you would be Instagram, Facebook, and checking it on YouTube. I just really want to thank you for coming on. I think you have some really cool stuff in your future here, and I'm excited to see some of the kit builds and the Travis Barker kit itself. I really want to say thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's fun talking drums anytime.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely do it in the future when you have a little bit more time. But, yeah, thank you once again.
Absolutely.
All right.